was there for almost a year, and the major in charge of our outfit called me in one day, and he said, "John, you're going to OCS at Miami Beach." And I said, "Major, I'm not too anxious to go down there. I've been down there, looked that situation over, and that's no garden spot." "Well," he said, "I've got a quota of 2, and I picked 2 out of this outfit to go, and you're one of them." Well, I said, "Thank you for that." And his name was Cronin. He was retread from World War I. And he was an Irishman from Boston. You didn't argue with him. That's all there was to that. I mean, I knew that because I'd worked with him enough to know that when he spoke, you listened. You didn't argue, so I went to OCS. They called us 90-day wonders, and I can tell you, the first 45 days, it's the one he lasted. After that, it was a little better when he became an upperclassman, but those first 45 days, they did about everything they possibly could to break you down, to throw you out. And any little fault that you had, boy, they sure picked on it. There was no question about that. But you went in there with the idea after about the first night, and I'd never taken such a beating in about 4 hours as we did that first night we arrived down there, because all the upperclassmen are waiting for you. And they just put you through their paces, and I mean, they really hounded you to death. We had guys quit right that night. They wouldn't go through with it. They said, "No, we've had enough of this." But they get you to the point, the old saying is, "Don't let the BAs get you down." And that was about the thing that brought us through that first night. And after that, why, it tapered off, but it was a very stressful type of thing, because every minute counted. There was no waste time. There was something every minute. And you put in 90 days of that, when you come out, you look back and you wonder how they make it. But we graduated, and I was commissioned second lieutenant, and I was poured out to St. Joe, Missouri, St. Joseph, Missouri. And that's where Jack Benny used to say, "They love me in old St. Joe." Well, it's quite a town. St. Joe got badly hit on the baton deal when we had in the Philippines, when we got kind of pushed around. And they lost a whole battalion of men. So the Army was quite welcome, and we kind of lightened the town up for a while. It was pretty good. I was there for 2.5 years. And finally, I said to the colonel one day, "I would like to get out of here." He says, "Why?" This was just before England, or the European situation was more or less gelled. We were getting all these men back, and they'd served their time, and instead of putting them out of the Army, they kept holding them, wondering what was going to come along in the Pacific. So we get all these men back. What do you do with them? We had no jobs for them. I mean, we were loaded. We could use them, but a lot of them weren't trained in the work we were doing. So that it became just a hodgepodge for a while, and I finally said to the colonel one day, I said, "Find me another spot somewhere in this world, will you?" So we called him, and they said, "How'd you like to go overseas?" I said, "That's fine. It's all right with me. I had enough of this." So I ended up in China. And that it was a cook's tour of the world. I will give the Air Force credit. They did a very nice job. We went, landed in Casablanca, spent a few days there. You could look it over and go to the Casbah and see what was going on. And we went on into Malaha, which is right next to Bizerte, and you could see all the damage from the air all through the desert, all piles of equipment laying all over that place. You couldn't believe it. Then we landed in Abadan in the Persian Gulf. And that is about the hottest place I think you can get outside of that place that some of us are going to, maybe. I don't know. But that was hot. I couldn't believe it. We landed there, and this is the thing that I couldn't believe. We landed there at 10:30 in the morning. You walked out of that airplane. It was just so someone opened the door of the furnace and stuck your head in it. It was over 102 degrees at that point. Well, of course, the first thing I did is fell flat on my face, because first shot of that hot air, and I wasn't used to it. Flying at 9,000 was nice, you know. But then we went on through into Karachi. From Karachi, I went into Calcutta. And the Assam Valley was one of the areas of India that was a very rough place due to weather. It was so darn hot, and the monsoon season was on. And then you could take your shoes off, and I'd get up in the morning, they're full of mold. Terrible. The heat and the moisture. You were perspiring 24 hours a day. This major said to me, "Where would you like to go, Captain?" I said, "Well, what do you got open other than the Assam Valley?" Because they don't need that. He said, "Talk about a few boys who are up there." Well, he said, how about China? Well, I said, that's probably next best.
Uh-huh.
So I ended up over in Kunming. We were 18 miles south of Kunming on the Vietnamese border. And I will say that those countries over there, I'm very glad I don't have to live in them,
Mm-hmm.
even today, because it's going to take another 500 years to modernize them, I think. It's tremendous. You can't believe it. The poverty, but this is the way they live. They don't know anything different.
Yeah.
And we, as far as being near Kunming, which was the Siberia of China, if anybody got in trouble in Shanghai or some of those big cities, they sent them to Kunming, get them out of their hair. Like years ago, they used to say Europe was the dumping ground for the problems of New York. So Kunming's was full of those guys, and that was a zoo. But we were 18 miles away. We used to fly it in preference to drive it. The roads are so bad. We used to get vehicles off the Lido Road. We'd get 10, and we'd make 5 out of 10. By the time we got them, they were worn out,
Uh-huh.
because it was really a rough country to run in. Well, I was there until, I think I got out of there in October after the August 14th fiasco.
Mm-hmm.
And I came back through and finally ended up in Fort Dix. And then I had a little problem getting out of the Army. They lost my records, and I got home. I got here the 31st of December that morning.
That was in 45?
That was in 45, yeah. And they lost my records, and I made 4 trips to Fort Dix from here. In those days, in January and February, wasn't a good driving situation. So finally the guy said to me, well, we can't do much for you. We can't find your records. Well, I said, there's one thing you can do. You get me out of this man's army somehow. He said, how about joining the reserves? Fine. Well, it would get me home, so we joined the reserves, and that was all there was to that. But I didn't get out of that until 6th of May. So it was all this time in between. And in the meantime, Marion's father was very ill, and the situation was bad. He had his business here. And I'd been down in New York and talked with the Wrigley Company, and they wanted me to go to Chicago. And that was not my personal choice. Well, they said, we've got a spot for you. I said, no thanks. Well, give it some thought. Don't give us your answer yet, because I was still in the service. And when you get out, you let us know. They said, if you have any problem, if you get a place to live, we'll take care of that and so forth. But we'd like to have you come back and go with us. And I was watching the situation here, and I could see that it was going to terminate very shortly, which it did.
Uh-huh.
So I decided I wanted to stay in the North Country. And so my wife, I can read and probably learn, and ought to be able to pick up the business and carry it along.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we started, and I'm still here.
And what business was that?
That was Walter H. Bisnet Incorporated. At that time, this business was known as Walter H. Bisnet. We incorporated under the same name. And I was there 30 years.
So in other words, your military service was mostly as a training officer, administrative
Yeah.
work, and mostly in this country.
Yeah, it was mostly a little over 4.5 years. I put in 2.5 were here. So I didn't have too much overseas time, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time was here.
And then from there you came back here, but you didn't mention when you were married or how you met your wife, or...
Oh, I met my wife very shortly before December 7th showed up. And we talked about the future, and about the time that came along, I said, I think we can go with the future for a little while till we see how this thing works out. So after I got assigned to St. Joe, I wrote Mary and I said, I think you better come out here and we'll see what we're going to do. Well, she came out with a return ticket, believe it or not.
Oh, she wasn't sure.
She wasn't sure. We already had it all planned, and I had all the plans made. We were married in St. Joe, and it was in 43. And we've been together ever since. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
According to some of the schedules today and the so-called time elements.
Was she able to go overseas with you at all?
No.
I didn't think so.
I brought her home. My oldest daughter was born in St. Joe, and I brought them home, and then I left, and they stayed here. She stayed here with her family till I got back. And I have 2 other daughters. I have Jane and Mary, Martha, and I have a son, John.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all on their own. I don't have to worry too much about them at the present time. John's just resigned his commission in the Army after he's got, I think, 13 years of service, recognized service. Part of his commission, part of it was enlisted. And he's very anxious to come back to the North Country, and he was just here yesterday, and he's put out some feelers to see if he can find what he wants up here. He's a graduate of Cornell, and then he took his MBA through the Army when he was down at Fort Knox. So he's got pretty good background in business administration, and most of his work, his infantry was training troops and leading troops. So he's had quite a bit of experience. So he wants to come back to the North Country, though. He's kind of like I am. He likes the North Country and Tug Hill, and of course, I think the camp on Tug Hill is his biggest objective right now, as he keeps saying, boy, I missed being up there. And I said, well, time will correct things after you get straightened around. His daughter Martha's in Rochester, she's a teacher. Mary is in Constable, and I don't think you could get her out of there either. She lives up on Smith Road on top of Crowfoot Hill, where you probably know where it is, Don.
Roughly.
Well, it's the second house in there on the right. Loves it. It snows a little deep there at times, but that doesn't seem to bother. They bought an old farmhouse that they're fixing over.
They're still involved with the parquet, are they?
No, they've been out of, see, they were only there 2 years, and the situation got so that the maintenance on the building, the owner would not take care of it. And when you work with an inch of water on your kitchen floor from rain, it's not too satisfactory. The building's in very bad shape. We did a lot of work on it, getting it opened up, and a couple of years they ran it. I spent a lot of time there. I'd hate to add up the hours, just trying to get things in a condition where they were safe. We had several electrical fires right in the bedrooms, which shows you how poor it was, all open, tube wiring up in the attic and things of that nature. It needed a lot of work. They did try to buy it, but they couldn't come to terms with the owner, which was too bad because they really had a good start and getting the thing going again. And that is a major industry in Constableville practically today.
Yes.
What's left of it, I would say. So they ran this business down here until 1973. And you know, there comes a time in business when you have to make up your mind which way you're going to go. I built it up to the point where it was getting beyond what they could handle. And when you're getting into 60, you don't feel like expanding and spending the rest of your life having to fight the battle of holding it together.
No.
I came home one day and I said to my wife, I think we're at the peak and I think it's time to do something with it before I end up in Ogdensburg, because the pressures are getting pretty heavy. We're going into a lot of this automated milking equipment, and it was getting electronic refrigeration, all this type thing, which is highly technical, and I had to learn it first in order to teach people that work for me how to do it too, and this is a problem when you get into that. And I want to know as much, if not more, than the men that work for me, because you can't tell a man what to do if you don't know how to do it yourself or what should be done. So I spent a lot of time in the field. People just said to me, well, you're never in the store. I said, no, I get people that can handle that part of it. I like the field. That's where the work is. So we came to the point, and I talked with her, and she agreed with me that time to sell it was when it was at the peak and somebody could pick it up and carry it on. And one of the men that worked for me, been there 26 years with me, plus Mike Lehman from Alville, decided to get together and they purchased it from us. But don't ever tell anybody when you so-called retire that you're free, because you aren't. No, you're never free. I look back now and I wonder, well, how did I ever get anything done years ago with the amount of time that I lack today to get things done? And the saying, I tell people, well, years ago don't mean anything to me, and months and days, but time I'm always short of, because there's always something coming up that you want to get done, and then something else comes in, and you hate to refuse people if they ask you to do things, and it's a constant battle to get time.
So what are some of the things you're involved in now that you're so-called retired?
Well, I try and help with the knowledge of having been in the business here, and I have a knowledge of electricity and plumbing and things of this nature, a little bit of carpentry and so forth, and homeowner type thing. And I have a lot of people who I still get calls from, and I know some of their situations financially. They can't afford, some of the help we have today, $34 an hour and so forth. And a lot of them are widowers.